For my Instagramming the Archives project, I decided to focus on the question of science and accessibility. Specifically, who is science accessible to in terms of abortions, healthcare, and insurance? I focused on an article from Off Our Backs, published in 1983, and the article Planned Parenthood Beginnings, published in 1979. The first thing I focused on was an article from the Off Our Backs magazine and what abortion access means in legal and religious contexts. So the first question I looked at was, what does Roe mean? This magazine was published in 1983, and one of the top articles is about Roe v. Wade. It was published 10 years after the case was originally passed, and the original passing of Roe meant that the Constitution was interpreted as granting a right to an abortion. This made abortion federally legal nationwide. Since Roe was overturned in 2022, the right to an abortion became an issue for the states to decide. The Supreme Court overturned the Roe decision by claiming the Constitution does not have a privacy right that could be interpreted as a right to things like abortion. So right now, Roe means nothing. But as we can see, it has been in contention since its passing, just as women's rights have been debated for hundreds of years. Previously, Roe had declared that anyone from any state had a right to access abortion care. Since it was overturned, abortion access now depends on the state you live in. The next thing I looked at was state Medicaid and health insurance. While Roe made abortion legal, it did not guarantee accessibility. States could not ban abortion in technical practice, but they could allow insurance companies and Medicaid to not cover the cost of such procedures. Medicaid is a health program that uses state and federal funding to provide low-income individuals with health insurance. It's crucial for some families. The Hyde Amendment was something I did some research into in relation to Medicaid and abortions. It was originally passed in response to the passing of Roe in 1977, 4 years after. This amendment was passed by Congress and it asserted that federal funding could not be used for abortions, specifically that Medicaid could not be used to cover abortion. This amendment was added onto the Department of Health and Human Services Appropriations Bill and has been continuously renewed as a part of the department's appropriations. According to Planned Parenthood's website, abortions can cost between $580 and $2,000, depending on the type of abortion, how far along the individual is in their pregnancy, and the state they live in. This means that lower income individuals are systematically limited access to abortions. Individuals on Medicaid are from lower income households. The out-of-pocket costs of an abortion being between nearly $600 and $2,000 is not realistically affordable for hardly anyone, let alone people who are living off of Medicare. An interesting thing I found in this magazine, Off Our Backs, it was kind of a highlight, a fun note, if you will, was a Roman Catholic nun who was appointed as head of the Michigan Department of Social Services in 1983. Based on my knowledge, the Roman Catholic Church is strictly opposed to abortions with no exceptions, and that includes no exceptions for rape or incest. The Vatican is mentioned in the article, and it's the world's central point for the Roman Catholic Church. It oversees followers of the religion, especially significant members such as nuns. And this nun, Sister Mary Agnes Monsieur, noted that she could be pressured by the Vatican to leave her state position. Sister Monsieur said that she would uphold that state funding would be used to allow Medicaid to cover abortions. Her reasoning was that even though she is opposed to abortions herself, as long as it is legal in the United States, it is a right that should be extended to everyone, regardless of their economic status. I found this really interesting because I think it is a great example of how church and state can be separated and how the accessibility of things such as healthcare shouldn't be determined based on your socioeconomic status or even your religious beliefs. The next article I found was within Off Our Backs on the next page was titled Abortion. This section covered the concept of who must be notified when a woman is getting an abortion. There must thus be a form of approval from the biological father, the parents of a minor, or the person's significant other. Because of this qualification, abortion access is restricted to women who can garner approval from other people, and it is not just a personal decision. Another article I looked into when looking in the archives was Planned Parenthood Beginnings. I specifically looked at the history of Planned Parenthood, and in the archives, I found this history section. This section specifically focused on Allentown, PA, which is close to where I'm from, so I found it's particularly interesting. When Planned Parenthood was starting, it did not immediately spread across the country. Margaret Sanger was the founder, and it took her getting arrested and fighting legal battles in the state of New York to make birth control generally accessible. She then opened her own clinic, and from there, Planned Parenthood became a sort of safe haven for women to be able to go to receive necessary health care. As it spread across states, it became more accessible, but even now, Planned Parenthood is challenged as a questionably necessary form of healthcare. While many women require it for their lives, it's not always believed to be as important as it is. This is my final slide, my works cited slide, and in final, the question of who is science accessible to in relation to women's healthcare, the answer is not all women. Social and economic class determines the quality and type of care someone receives. And while Roe is now overturned, prior to this, women had a formal right to abortion on a constitutional basis. This meant that the science of this necessary healthcare should have been a right for all women to have and act upon. However, even granted the federal right, the government found a way to minimize this right for those who could not afford health insurance. Therefore, the accessibility of science will always come down to economic class.